The desert was silent. The kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes the air heavy, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Heat rippled across the ground, warping the horizon, turning everything into a mirage. Then, out of that endless nothingness, a black SUV roared into view, tires grinding sand, raising a storm of dust that swallowed the sunlight. The vehicle skidded to a stop. Doors slammed. Shadows poured out. 3 men, faces hidden under black masks, boots sinking into the soft earth. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew no one was watching, no one would stop them. From the back seat, they dragged a man. His clothes were plain, dusty. His wrists bound behind him. His face bruised and streaked with sweat. They shoved him forward, and he fell to his knees on the cracked ground. The cartel had taken another victim. One of the masked men grabbed him by the collar, jerking his head back to force his eyes toward the blazing sky. Another whispered something in Spanish, a cruel joke that made the others laugh. They thought it was already over. They thought this man was broken. Helpless. Finished. But his eyes told a different story. They were sharp. Focused. Calm in a way that didn't fit the scene. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't begging. He was calculating. The leader crouched down in front of him, his mask inches from the prisoner's face. He tilted his head like a snake studying prey. The silence dragged on until he finally spoke, his words muffled but filled with menace. You will disappear here. No one will remember you. The man on the ground did not answer. His lips parted just enough to take in the dry air, his chest rising slowly, steadily. Inside, his mind was not panicking, it was working. Every detail mattered. The way the ropes were tied. The position of the sun. The distance to the SUV. The rhythm of their breathing. All of it. Because he wasn't who they thought he was. He wasn't just a border agent. He was something far deadlier. A retired Navy SEAL. A man trained to survive captivity, trained to wait, trained to let arrogance become the enemy's weakness. But for now, he remained still. The cartel members dragged him to his feet, pushing him toward the SUV again. His boots scuffed against the sand, each step sinking slightly. Behind the masks, their eyes sparkled with cruelty, convinced they had power. Convinced that this man was already dead. Inside the SUV, the heat was suffocating. The air reeked of sweat, leather, and gasoline. They shoved him against the seat, slammed the door, and the engine roared back to life. The vehicle jolted forward, speeding deeper into the desert. Through the tinted glass, the landscape stretched endlessly, brown, gold, lifeless. But he memorized every turn, every bump in the road, every shadow cast by the rocks. His training whispered inside his skull, nothing is wasted. Every detail is survival. The cartel men spoke to each other, laughing, throwing words around like blades. They called him weak. They called him disposable. They spoke of what would happen to him when they reached their destination. They thought he didn't understand. But he did. He understood every word. And he stored it away, because knowledge was power. The drive ended at a warehouse on the edge of nowhere. A rusting shell of concrete and steel, half buried in sand. They dragged him out, his knees buckling slightly as if he were losing strength. They didn't know it was an act. Inside, the air was cooler but heavy with the smell of dust and oil. Shafts of light cut through the broken roof, casting stripes across the floor. They tied him to a chair, the rope biting into his wrists, his ankles locked against the legs of the chair. Then came the silence again. Only their footsteps echoed. One of them leaned close, pulling off his mask just enough to reveal a grin full of rotten teeth. Here, no one will hear you scream. The prisoner lowered his head. His breathing slowed. His eyes traced the room, broken pipes, a loose metal rod in the corner, a cracked window above. His mind pieced it all together, turning the environment into a map, a weapon waiting to be used. What the cartel didn't know was simple. This wasn't his first cage. The warehouse creaked like a dying animal, the wind pushing through cracks in the walls and roof. The men moved around him, restless shadows under dim shafts of light. They spoke in low tones, their voices bouncing off the metal beams. One laughed as he tightened the ropes on his wrists, yanking them until the skin burned. Another leaned against a wall, arms crossed, eyes filled with casual cruelty. The man in the chair kept his head lowered, breathing slow, steady. He looked beaten. Defeated. Exactly what they wanted to see. But behind his stillness, every muscle was alive, waiting. A drop of sweat slid down his temple, catching the light before falling to the dusty floor. He counted them in his head. 1, 2, 3 men in the room. A fourth outside, pacing near the SUV, his footsteps crunching on sand and gravel. The ropes were tight, but not perfect. They were tied by men who had never been trained to keep someone like him restrained. He twisted his wrists slightly, feeling the fibers scrape his skin. Pain flared, but with it came movement. Tiny, almost invisible, but enough. His breathing stayed calm, almost meditative, as the rope began to loosen one strand at a time. One of the masked men approached, crouching so their eyes met. He pulled the prisoner's chin up roughly. "Scared yet?" he hissed, his grin splitting under the mask. The prisoner met his gaze without a word. His silence was louder than any answer. It unsettled the man, just for a second, a flicker of doubt flashing in his eyes. Then he forced a laugh and pushed his head back down. That second was all he needed. The ropes gave way with a final tug. Not enough to free him completely. Not yet. But enough to prepare. Enough to turn the cage into an opportunity. He kept still, hiding the truth, waiting for the perfect moment. Hours bled away. The sun outside dipped lower, the light spilling through the broken roof turning red, painting everything in blood-colored shadows. The men grew careless. One leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Another walked outside to smoke. The leader barked orders on a phone, pacing near the door. And then, the opportunity arrived. The man by the wall bent down to adjust his boot, his face turned away. The leader's voice grew louder, distracted by whoever was on the other end of the call. The smoker outside coughed, the sound carrying into the room. The prisoner inhaled slowly, his chest rising once, then falling. In one fluid motion, he pulled his arms free, the ropes snapping loose. His hands shot forward, grabbing the loose metal rod he had been eyeing for hours. The man by the wall didn't have time to react. A swift strike sent him crashing to the ground, unconscious before his body hit the floor. The leader spun, eyes wide, the phone falling from his hand. He shouted, calling for the others. But by the time the smoker outside rushed back in, it was too late. The prisoner moved like a storm. Silent, precise, unstoppable. Every strike was calculated. Every movement exact. He didn't waste energy. He didn't waste time. Years of training surged through him, turning captivity into chaos, fear into fuel. The warehouse echoed with the sounds of struggle, grunts, thuds, the crash of metal against concrete. The dust rose in thick clouds, swallowing the light. Shadows twisted violently until, one by one, they fell. When the dust settled, the prisoner stood alone. His chest rose and fell, sweat dripping, blood staining the floor. Around him, silence returned, heavy, absolute. The kind of silence that follows judgment. He walked toward the broken window, pushing it open with his bare hands. The desert air rushed in, cool against his burning skin. Outside, the horizon was painted gold and crimson by the dying sun. He didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to look at. He stepped out into the desert, his silhouette swallowed by the glow of twilight. Each step was steady, unbroken, the stride of a man who had been underestimated and had turned that mistake into survival. The cartel thought they had found prey. Instead, they had awakened a predator. And in the desert, predators don't beg. They endure. They finish. They disappear into the horizon, leaving only silence and a lesson written in fear. A Navy SEAL had been taken captive. But a Navy SEAL does not remain a captive. And for those who dared to forget that truth, the desert would remember.